retired Brigadier General to the IDF. She's a former deputy to the National Security Advisor. She's also a co-founder and co-developer of the Geneva Peace Initiative. Her name is Israela Oron, and we're here to discuss with her the prospects of peace. Israela, in the past 2.5 decades, we've had the Madrid Conference, the Oslo Accords, the Wye River Memorandum, the Camp David Summit, the Hadas Summit, the Roadmap, the Annapolis Conference, and most recently the Kerry Initiative. So that's 8 attempts in total by the Israeli government to reach a peace agreement with the Palestinians. In your judgment, considering the makeup of the now newly formed Israeli coalition government and the current situation on the ground, do you think there'll be a 9th attempt? And if so, what do you think are the chances of its success?
I believe that your former remarks suggested that or implied that we were not very successful in those attempts.
Do you think we were successful?
No, we were not. And it's quite evident that we don't have any peace between us and the Palestinians. The tendency to continue from the point that you stopped the negotiation last time and to just to continue it as if nothing happened is a big mistake.
Is this what happened in the past 8 attempts?
I believe it was.
Okay.
I think the negotiators didn't seriously take into account the changes inside Israel and outside Israel, and they didn't try seriously to evaluate those changes and the implication of those changes to the peace process. So if one wants to renew the negotiation or to do something with regard to peace in Israel and in Palestine and in the international community, we should really reevaluate the situation. And the situation is not the same that it was like in the Oslo Accord, and even not in the Annapolis.
Okay.
And we have to look at it with open eyes and a realistic point of view, and not to go into illusions on one hand and not to despair on the other hand.
Can you point out, you say that there were changes in both in the Israeli society, internationally, etc., which made it difficult to pick up from where the previous negotiations left off. Are there specific things you can point to that have changed in such a way that has made it difficult to carry on?
First of all, one thing didn't change. Netanyahu is still the Prime Minister of Israel. But I'm not sure that this is very good news to the peace prospect.
Okay.
However, you have to look at the Middle East and to see what kind of changes happened in the last few years, and it will not be a great surprise to anybody when I will mention what is going on in Egypt, in Syria, all what's going on in Iraq, Daesh, etc.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really encourage people to go into negotiations that will end with an agreement that nobody knows how long it will last.
Okay.
So the situation is very fragile in the area. This is one thing. And you have to think about it when you are trying to negotiate about a peace treaty, because many people in Israel, for example, are saying, just imagine what would happen if we would reach an agreement with Assad with regard to Syria. Daesh
would have Daesh on the Golan Heights.
Exactly.
Right.
And then I'm looking at the international arena, and I'm looking at the United States first. And what I'm hearing, first of all, the kind of relationship between us and the United States are very different.
Okay.
A lot of suspicion, a lot of mistrust, a lot of despair.
Bad vibes.
Yes, bad vibe. And the other thing is, if I would be Obama, which I'm not, I would think, okay, I have another 1.5 years to end my presidency.
Yeah.
What should I do? Should I concentrate on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which didn't have any great success?
Right.
Or should I do something else, like concentrate on other issues, like internal issues in the United States, or maybe I will deal with Ukraine, maybe I will deal with Daesh, maybe I will deal with Yemen.
Okay.
His plate is full of other stuff.
Right. Okay, I appreciate what you're saying, but I'd like to draw your attention to another change, which I think is very dramatic and is kind of missed on the Israeli side of the discourse, of the conversation regarding the conflict. And that is a change that I have seen develop on the Palestinian side. Probably mainly so in the Palestinian diaspora, in the Palestinians outside of Palestine, but it's trickling down to the Palestinians within Palestine as well. And the change I'm talking about is that the Palestinians have fallen out of love with the two-state solution. They now want a one-state solution, for obvious reasons. I mean, strategically wise, one-state solution, one man, one vote, game over. And it's an idea that is heavily promoted by groups such as BDS, but not just BDS, it's actually gone mainstream now within Palestinian communities. And I wonder how much the Israeli decision makers, people who will be there to sit and negotiate with the next peace deal, take that on board. Do they realize that this is going on?
Okay, this is a very interesting point. However, I would like to try and correct something you said.
Okay.
Because there is a contradiction between the BDS movement and the one-state solution. It's the opposite. Because the people that are preaching for the BDS,
right,
they believe in two-state solution, and this is their way to enforce Israel to come to some kind of an agreement. This is a tool. The BDS is a tool to get to a two-state solution.
Yeah, you say that, but I've actually seen BDS officials, and I've read BDS documentation. In fact, one of their stated goals, they have 3 goals. The third goal is the right of return for all Palestinian refugees, all of them, the ancestors, the grandfathers, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, etc., to their original places in Israel, and to have an equal vote within Israel. And a lot of people read between the lines and understand this to be a mechanism to end the Jewish majority in Israel. And I've seen people on their behalf actually say it explicitly, and in the text you can read it between the lines. So I would beg to differ in your analysis that they actually wanted two-state solution.
The international movement of the BDS, I mean the majority of them, are trying to use it as a tool to force Israel to get to some kind of an agreement and to reach a two-state solution. Otherwise, there is no point of those sanctions. If they really, the Palestinians and the people that support them and the international community would like to reach a one-state solution, they would use, and they are using, really different tools. Because you just have to wait and do nothing and oppose any attempt to reach a two-state solution.
Well, some would argue that this is why 8 of the previous attempts failed. They're fooling everybody. They make everyone think that they do want some kind of a solution, but it's just a tactic to wait it out until, as you say, until this happens, until...
Which brings me to my solution. First of all, I do agree that many of the negotiations failed because of the Palestinians. And you have to really blame the Palestinians for some of the failures of the negotiation. Not all of them,
right,
not always, but some of them. Which make you ask yourself, okay, if they really don't want any solutions that will be agreed by both sides and will reach a two-state solution, what should Israel do? And this is the question that you asked me before. If this is the case, and I was talking about re-evaluation, and when I was talking about re-evaluation, I meant that we have to re-evaluate the situation in the West Bank and Gaza parallelly.
Okay.
First of all, let's see what's going on with the unity government of the Palestinians. The peace camp in Israel was blamed that we are negotiating with Abu Mazen when the other half or third of the Palestinian population is in Gaza and they are not part of this agreement.
Yeah.
So everybody hoped for some kind of unity government, which the chances for unity government right now are really limited, if not less.
You know, it's ironic because when they did form a unity government, Israel then criticized the Palestinian leadership as making an alliance with a terrorist organization.
Yes,
so you can't have it both ways. On the one hand,
I am not a spokesman for the Bibi government.
Okay.
And so I know that this was the official position of the Israeli government, but I'm speaking as Israela Oron, and I have my own views.
Sure. Yeah.
But in my views, if it would have succeeded,
Right.
this attempt to create a unity government, it would be some kind of a good news for the peoples that believe in a two-state solution. Why? Because then you could reach an agreement that would be embraced by all parts of the Palestinian people. However, it didn't happen, and the chance for it to happen now is very limited. So what I'm saying is, if you cannot make peace with 1/3 of the Palestinians that are in Gaza, you have to think about what are the chances to make peace with those that are in the West Bank. And the question is, and I just want to mention one fact, that in the last election in the university in the West Bank, who won?
I don't know.
A month ago, Hamas.
Okay.
And I don't know about other elections in other universities.
This is in the West Bank?
Yes, in the West Bank, not in Gaza. So why should they make peace with populations that really want to re-elect Hamas? You have to really understand what's going on in the West Bank. And I would like very much to see what are the Palestinians committed to. Because when I'm looking at the offers that Olmert gave to Abu Mazen, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I cannot see now any Israeli leader giving more.
Offer, yeah.
Making the same offer or giving more than that.
Right.
So what are we talking about? So the situation is, and I'm saying it with a lot of pain, I'm sorry to say, that Israel will have to decide what is best for her, what is best for the state of Israel and the citizens of Israel. If we cannot make an agreement, the best thing for us to do is to get rid of the occupation and to create our own country within the borders that we think that will serve our interest, and this is the case.
So you mean a unilateral step?
Maybe it is and we have many ideas that we can explore with regard to unilateral steps. The basic wrong thing that we have now in Israel is that we are ruling another people, the Palestinians. We don't want to be there. We want to be in Israel within our own borders, and the Palestinians can think to do whatever they want.
But the problem with this proposed solution, though, is that we have in the region of 300,000 settlers in the West Bank. 200,000 plus in East Jerusalem, whether you want to count that as settlers or not, that's another issue. But in the region of 500,000 settlers, which if you take unilateral steps, what do you do with them? I mean, this is too tight a knot to untie, and it's getting tighter and tighter.
The settlers are not, all of them are not the same group. Okay. They are divided into many other groups. And since you already mentioned that I am one of the founders of the Geneva initiative, our solution for this is to make swaps.
But swaps is not a unilateral step, though. Swaps is an agreement.
Swap is an agreement. So sometimes if the other side don't want to make an exchange to those lands and don't want to get land from Israel that belong now to Israel and to make an exchange of land, which we call it swap, we'll have to make unilateral steps that will annex the majority of and we are talking about maximum 6% of the area of the West Bank, 6%.
6% consists of the majority of the settlers?
Yes, okay. More than 70% of the settlers.
Right, okay.
More than 70%.
More than 70%, yeah.
So the other will have to deal with it. I mean, this is bad news for them. However, we cannot put the future of the state of Israel in the hands of 30% of the settlers that will not be able to accept this solution, this decision of an Israeli government.
Yeah, unfortunately, with the results of the last election, it seems as if we are actually letting the extreme right make that decision for us.
I'm sorry, but this is the first time that I agreed to publicly to unilateral steps.
Okay.
And this is because I didn't hear, not Abu Mazen, not Abu Ala, not anybody on the other side saying clear and loud they are still committed to a two-state solution, and they accept the fact that Israel will be the homeland of the Jewish people.
Because maybe they're not committed to that. Going back to my first point.
Okay, they are not committed to this. They don't believe that we have a right to be here. We have a problem. The only framework that we should agree with the Palestinians, that between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, there are two people that have rights in this territory. Now, let's talk about the practical issues about it. The people that live in the majority of the people that live in the West Bank and Gaza are entitled to their own country. The same in Israel, their own state.
I think the issue is that the majority of Palestinians would say that your proposition that two peoples have a right to this land doesn't hold. They don't think we have a right to that. And I agree with you, that's a big problem that we have to reevaluate and address.
Okay, so if the majority of the Palestinians don't accept it, they will have to adjust to it. And to, what can I say, to continue to be in the same situation that they are now.
Okay, but by the way, I just want to pick up on something else you said earlier. You said you've not heard a clear commitment from Abu Mazen, Abu Ala, and the rest of the Palestinian leaders to the two-state solution. But Bibi hasn't been very clear on that either. I mean, they could say the same about the Israeli leaders. The Israeli leadership for the past, 6 or so years, Bibi has been very back and forth on this. He's made the famous Bar Ilan declaration that he's in favor of a two-state solution. Then on the eve of the election, or somewhere close to election, he backed off from that. Then he went back to it again. I mean, they could say the same.
The reason that I'm not a politician is because I really cannot stand those declarations that are empty declarations that doesn't mean anything. And what if Bibi will just stand now and say, okay, I accept the Arab Peace Initiative, and then for the next 2, 3, 4 years, he will say stuff or release ambiguous statements about stuff like this, like he did in Bar Ilan. What really matters is what's going on the ground, and if we'll continue the occupation and we'll build more and more settlements in isolated areas, there is no chance for us to get to any agreement with the Palestinians. And I'm sorry to say that any leader, and it really doesn't matter if he is a Palestinian or an Israeli leader that just releases empty statements, I cannot believe them.
Right.
Both sides.
Yeah, sure, I understand. And do you think that Bibi and his coalition members like Naftali Bennett, who famously do not want to give up, at least Naftali Bennett, any land at all for the sake of peace and for the sake of reaching an agreement, I mean, these are intelligent people. Surely they understand, and I'd like you to explain to me, surely they understand that if we don't reach an agreement, it will be, eventually, everything will merge together, it will be a one state. This is unsustainable. And they're not stupid. Do they not see that?
I think that they are not willing to pay the price for peace. Many leaders, unfortunately, are willing to pay the price for war. And they are not willing to take the chance and to take the risks of a peace agreement. And both Bennett and Bibi are intelligent people, and I think that they believe that they could go on with maintaining this illusion everything is fine till the next explosion or till the next war, and then we can handle it, and then we can manage the conflict. Managing the conflict we can manage the conflict, but what about our kids? What about our grandchildren? In my case, what about them?
My grandchildren too.
Yes.
Although I don't have them yet, but I
and
will
your
eventually.
grandchildren as well. And I believe that they understand the situation, and what is needed here is a leadership that will be able to take the risk. And I would like to add another point, which somehow people don't understand the connection between this and making peace. The situation of Israel with regard to its democratic values is very problematic. And I think this is the basis, because if the people in Israel don't understand the values of democracy, like the status of the Supreme Court, like all of those strange laws against democracy that are passing in the Knesset, if the majority of the people in Israel don't understand it, of course they cannot understand that we cannot rule another people in the West Bank. We cannot be the rulers of the West Bank. If they don't understand these basic values, we have really an issue here.
So maybe the blame is with regards to what you just said, maybe the blame is on those who should be explaining that to them. Maybe it's not been explained well enough, not been explained properly, not been explained extensively enough, and therefore there's too many people who simply do not understand because there's nobody there explaining.
I believe that the people that we are trying to explain to them, I mean the Israeli left, I mean the Geneva Accord, they don't believe us because they think that we have a hidden agenda. Because they are manipulated by many of them. By the way, also of the left side, they are manipulated by the media, by the mass media. And they don't believe us. This is a very painful failure of the Israeli left, that how can we benefit from a peace agreement, as opposed to what is the cost, the painful cost to continue this situation. And I think we have to rethink about it also, our camp. We have to make a very serious process of thinking, how can we really make the majority in Israel understand that we are heading
towards a disaster.
Because one state is a disaster.
So, just before we wrap up, let's just have a little thought experiment as we're talking about the one state. What if it was a one state, one vote for one man, Palestinians and Israelis? What's wrong with that?
Your question is based on the illusion that we are going to hug each other and kiss each other in the streets of Jerusalem and Nazareth and Ramallah.
So your answer will just be a bloodbath between Israelis and Jews and
if you say that the reason for creating a one-state solution is because extreme people, or maybe the majority, you said the majority of the Palestinians, don't accept us here. So how come
they accept? Yeah.
How come that they will accept us when they will be the majority? I would like to see that. And the same with in the Israeli side. If they don't accept Arabs, and some of us in Israel treat the Arabs in a way that I'm ashamed of, how comes that all of a sudden we'll start to hug each other? No way it will happen. This is an illusion.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think I would also add to that, if I may, that we have a particular history where when we didn't have a state, we were prosecuted in the ways that we were, which makes us even more sensitive and more in need of a state of our own as a safe haven for the Jewish people.
Are you implying that we are not so popular? Yes.
Slightly.
Unfortunately, the Jewish people, we are not very popular in many places. In the history, even now, we are not very popular. And we need a state that we can defend ourselves. And we we'll have a country that the people, the Jewish people that have problems all over the world will be able to have a shelter here.
Find a home in, yeah.
And this is the homeland of the Jewish people, and I'm very sorry that there are some people in the world that don't accept it, but they will have to live with it.
And live with it they shall. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was fascinating.